So this is a PowerPoint that I'm going to narrate for you of historical aspects of reading and writing. And we begin with a Sumerian logograph, which is about 4000 BC, and you can see that there are pictures here that represent words or the story that's being told. And then we also have the same thing in Mayan iconography, which is about 2000 BC. And again, the story is being told. And here I'm not sure if it's going from left to right or from right to left, but early writing was had both. Some aspects went left to right, and then some countries and other countries or languages went from right to left. This is a New England primer from 1690, and you can see these are syllables that children would learn to pronounce, so using short vowels and consonants. What we call today, this would be a rhyme or a word family. So the ob word family would have words like rob, sob, bob, cob, but this was probably used in a slightly different way back in 1690. And then Webster's American Spelling Book from 1831. Here are a list of words that have the first sound of TH, as in think. And you can think about how TH sounds, either the th sound or the sound, and think of different words that have that. But these are all words that have the th sound. And then these would be a teaching alphabet. Down at the bottom we have things like our digraphs, like SH makes the sound sh, and that's represented in our language by two letters. Things like here we have thumb and that. So the two digraphs that we represent with the TH. We also have sounds that are made up of digraphs with vowels, like the I consonant E, the E. Here is one vowel that makes a slightly different sound. So again, this is a representation of the alphabet. So here are these quotes. You can come back to these if you don't have time to read them. So this is a quote from the 1st century BC, and now we'll go on to think about how children learn to read. And there's two different schools of thought. One is that they learn to read from part to whole. So we start with the letters and move up to words, sentences, paragraphs. And some people believe that children learn to read whole to part. So we start with the language. We start with whole paragraphs and stories and meaning. So here again we have Edmund Burke Huey notes that teachers teach reading with emphasis on words. So that would be the whole, or letter-sound relationships, which would be the part. The interesting thing that Huey found is that the eye, or the brain, takes as long to recognize a single letter as a whole word. So if we're doing letters to word, and we're getting children to concentrate on that single letter, then we may be slowing them down. And that led to a whole word approach. I paused that by mistake. It led to a whole word approach that it says it lasted through the mid-1960s, but there are still some teachers who follow this. So we have here again a 1923 primer, and you can take some more time to come back to this or pause the tape and look at it and see. What we have is a very common nursery rhyme that we know today. And here's some more about Little Boy Blue that is something that we're not quite as sure of today. And we'll talk about the way these books are set up and how they can benefit children. Here's one from 1934, and you can see some of the things that we talk about with primers and reading books from the 20th century is all of the characters are white. We have in this story both a girl and a boy, and the girl is obviously feminized by her dress, which in 1934 a girl would have always been wearing a dress to school. The language is very repetitive. So Jane says, I like the toy cat. Jerry says, I like the toy dog. And you would find this throughout the book, very simple sentences and very simple words. So we come to the 1960s where we have this big debate, whether it's phonics or whole word reading. And here's Jean Chall. So at that time, in 1967, there was more of a focus on whole words, and the Dick and Jane books would introduce words through flashcards. While now we know that research states that when you use an approach that has an element of phonics, it has better results than those that do not. So phonics began to be introduced, I would say reintroduced into basal reading programs. But the one problem is when you focus too much on phonics, then there's little room for meaning. So we can think about the sentence, a man had a tin pin. It's a pin for a cap. It's a cap for Dan. It takes a while, even for those of us who are fluent readers, to not necessarily decode the words, but to figure out the meaning that's trying to be provided in these sentences. We go back again to a McGuffey reader from 1879. Again, you see here almost all of these words are short A words. Rab, and, rab, has, hat, can, and, catch, rab. So there's a few what we would call sight words like see and has, but many of these words are short vowel A words. Here's a quote that I'm going to let you read. Okay, in the 70s we had what they called the cognitive revolution, where people began looking at the brain and how is the brain working. So we're studying children's process of language learning through modeling and the need to communicate. Children gradually develop a language because of that need that they have. And then we have, at this point in time, some psycholinguistic theories, which now leads to the rise of the whole language movement. And I would say read these quotes. Come back to it if you don't have time. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about my 3 children. Greg came to us at the age of 6.5. He was an abused child who had ended up in the foster care system that we ended up adopting. At that age, he didn't know the alphabet or letter sounds, and he needed intensive work with phonics and with literature in order to learn to read. Lily, who was our birth child, experienced literature and word play and letter play from birth, and she had no formal instruction in reading, but she was reading fluently by the age of 4. Ben, who is also adopted, came to us at 2 days of age, and so he also experienced literature and word play and letter play pretty much from birth. But he didn't learn his letters until he was about 5.5, in spite of being in a very intensive preschool program where he was exposed to the letters and the names and sounds. He just wasn't ready developmentally to learn that, and he did learn it when he went into kindergarten at about age 5.5, and then he learned to read at the end of 1st grade. Okay, in the 1990s, we come back to more of a research base. Adams finds that exposure to print and enthusiastic encouragement are not enough. So what he would say, what happened for Lily, would not happen for many of our children. So we also need a systematic, explicit instruction on sounds and letter patterns in words. The importance of phonemic awareness comes to light in the research, and a phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in words. And in addition to phonemic awareness, children need to be aware of letter-sound correspondence, which is what we call phonics. And then we have within our country in the 2000s is the rise of standards-based education. So I'll let you study this on your own. Again, to perhaps pause the video and look at this, but this comes from an instruction manual for teachers, which tells teachers everything they need to say. We have in 2000 the National Reading Panel, a review of scientifically based reading research, and they emphasize 5 areas for reading instruction, which are listed here and will be part of the things that we talk about throughout this course. Okay, so there's the end of this video. Some of the parts I rushed through because I only have 15 minutes per video. So what I would suggest is that those things that you didn't have time to read through, that you go back and read the slides and think about any questions or comments that you would like to share with me, either via email or the next time that we meet.